Hi, and welcome back to the next week of our sew along for A Side of Hearts. And this week we get to start working on our hearts. But isn't it gorgeous seeing all of our HSTs already up and in our color gradient and in this gorgeous, gorgeous fabric? So my design wall is not long enough. I do have a row sitting here on the table. That was better than the floor. But I hope you've had fun doing your HSTs. Don't forget, of course, if you've got any questions, hop on over to our Facebook Sewalong Recruiting Group. Join that. You've got to answer a few questions just to help keep out the spammers and the bots and things like that. But in there, we can share your progress and get comments and cheering along from other people and all the rest. Now, if you're not into Facebook at all, that's fine. You can drop a comment in the comments below or contact me through Instagram or the website. So lots of fun things. This week and next week, we're doing the heart. So we're getting our two pieces of heart fabric and our background pieces, all of our background pieces. That was a bit of fun cutting. And so pretty. I really, really love the white fabric that came with the collection, Heart Ombre Metallics. The little pink hearts and then these little gold metallic ones just scattered across through the fabric. Going to look lovely. When you are cutting out your background fabrics into the big squares, then cutting into triangles, the smaller squares, and then the very, very small squares, if you start, as I said, with the larger pieces or the larger strips to cut out all those pieces, there is a little bit of a strip left over from cutting those, as well as a little bit of fabric from each strip. And then similarly with the smaller squares, there's quite a bit of one strip left and there's little bits left from cutting the rest of the squares out. And so you can actually, by using the scraps left over from those strips, cut all of your little squares that you need without having to cut any more fabric. But if you don't like doing that, or you have designs on these other pieces of leftover strips for another project, you can cut the rest into normal strips and cut them out. I found using my stripology ruler was really handy. I don't know whether you've ever seen one of those. They are very big. Well, actually, they do have a couple of different sizes, but this is basically a 20-inch wide one, and it has little slots for where you can place your fabric on your cutting mat, line up your stripology ruler, and then you put your rotary cutter in these slits and cut them, and it makes perfect strips to the right size. There's lots of different markings. You can do half-inch markings. So the only thing is it's a little bit, not fragile, but it bends quite a bit. So I like to keep it flat and out of the way, which means then I forget to use it. But I've found a new place for my rulers, which hopefully I'll show a video of that soon. And I've got my stripology ruler now right near my cutting table. So doing these was a breeze. So enjoy your cutting of your background. Okay, so let's get to making some hearts. Now, if you've been joining in on our A Year of Hearts block of the month, you will have made lots of hearts by now. They are reasonably easy, and I've explained in the pattern how to do it. I'm just going to show you some of the pressing tips today, because that just helps to make your heart nest nicely and allow you to press it and get it nice and flat. And then we're going to look at putting the triangles around the heart and also then trimming the heart. That's perhaps the more difficult part of this block. Not that it's very difficult, really. So let's get to it. So the first thing we're going to do when we're making our hearts is draw some lines on the back of our squares. Now, I still do this, especially with the larger ones. I find it easier to follow a line than doing anything else. However, when it comes to the smaller ones, I do sometimes not bother putting the line on the back, and I have some of this cluck cluck sew diagonal seam tape on my machine. I'll link to the video on how to use this, because I find for the smaller ones, it makes things so much easier and quicker. But I'll just show you how I do this. I have this cool little ruler, which is actually a 1/2 inch wide, and there is this fine little etched line in the middle, which makes it very easy for drawing lines for HSTs. But what we're going to do today, because this is the bottom stitch and flip corner for our heart, this is quite a big piece of fabric. So what I'm going to do is do a bit of little scrap saving, and I am going to not only draw my line, for the corner to corner, which is where we want to sew, I'm also going to draw a second line 1/2 inch away, because that will mean when we're sewing our heart, we can sew that line, and that'll be where our normal stitch and flip is. We're going to then sew another seam on this line, because then we can cut our 1/4 inch in between, and we've got a little HST here and our big stitch and flip corner. So I'll show you a bit more of that, but 2 lines. Now, as I said, I've got this cool little 1/2 inch ruler, which makes it nice and easy, but you can do just the same using a normal ruler. Corner to corner, and then scooch it over 1/2 inch so that the 1/2 inch line is going corner to corner, and then you're going to draw another line there. So either way, that's how I'm going to prepare my squares for my heart. Now, I use an air erasable pen, which means that I can't mark all my squares up and leave them sitting there for 2 days because the marks will disappear. So I just do, a group at a time, maybe 5 or 6 or something like that, so I can just sit and sew for a bit before it disappears. Now, as I said, you can mark then the lines across the back of here, or if you have something like the diagonal seam tape, or even just for little squares this size, your eye. Once you've been sewing a little while, you can probably sew across the diagonal on that by eye without too many problems. So there we are, ready to start sewing our heart. So I've actually left the labels on so that when I took them to the sewing machine, I could remember which was my sides and where they're going to go in the finished product onto the design wall. So I've just pinned them just out of the way. So we did that double seam so that we can get this extra little HST. So I'm just going to cut the 1/4 inch between the two of those, and I'm going to then cut 1/4 inch away from the sewn line on each of the corners. These I actually think are just too small, unless you do some sort of crumb kind of quilting or something like that. But when you have something that big, I want to make use of it. So trim between those 2 lines to get the 1/4 inch there. Okay, so I'm going to press my little my bonus half square triangles first. I'm just going to put the dark colour on top and just press back with my little Alexa Mini. And so there I have 2 HSTs that I can trim down later and use either on the backing of this project or a completely different project. And now let's get to the hearts. Just a bit further. So I like to place my hearts in the heart shape on my ironing board. because the left one, I'm going to do the basics. I will just take that number off. I'm literally just going to press towards the corners for this heart. So there we've got nice easy press. And for the right hand side of the heart, I'm going to press towards the actual heart rectangle, towards the heart fabric. This just allows our seams to nest so much better when we are going to start sewing it together. Now, this right hand side one, I've said in the pattern just to do both of these in towards your heart fabric, but this one is immaterial. It doesn't really matter. So if you want to make life a little quicker, you can just press that one out. So there we have the two sides pressed, and it means that then when we come in to putting it together, we can actually nest those seams and pin, and nest the two seams down the bottom and pin that one. And then when we sew, those are nicely nested and you'll get your points matching pretty closely. So just that last seam to go and we'll have finished our heart. Now once I've done that middle seam, I can come back and press it. And I like to press these middle seams of the hearts open because it makes it so much flatter. It's a little bit more fiddly, but worth the effort. And I find that if I finger press just before I get to it with the iron, things sit a little bit flatter. And then give it a press on the other side. And that is pretty good. Those points are very, very, very close. So that's how to make the basic heart. Now we just need to add our triangles to it. We're going to do the top and bottom first, and that's the easiest. Just going to have to move my little label. So we're going to do this seam along here, and the easiest way to find the center point is this seam, and just lining that point up with that seam and moving it up to here so that we can sew that. I'm just going to pin that so that it stays, and then do a very similar thing to the bottom seam where you line up the point, line up the top, and then pin, if I had a pin. I pinned them for a pin. Now, remembering that these sides of the triangles are also bias cut, so will stretch a bit. So just be a bit careful when you're sewing those. I like to pin the ends so that as you're sewing, they don't start to move away. So once you've sewn those two, I'll come back and show you the next step. So we just need to press those triangles back. And then just to make the bulk a little bit neater, we're just going to trim off these little dog ears. And just in case you're concerned about me using my ironing board on top of my cutting mat, I have a baking tray. This is silicon, and that stops the heat from transferring. I'm not doing, obviously, a lot of pressing. I'm just doing the pressing here for our video. The whole quilt I'm doing on my full ironing station in my craft room. So that's our top two triangles done. The next, we need to be putting them onto this side. We need to be centering it. So I like to come along and just do a little finger press. And I'm just matching up these seams. So we've got a finger press of where the sides are, and then a finger press of where it is on our triangle. And we're just going to match them up. And again, I'm going to pin and sew. So now that I've pressed my last two seams, we've got our heart block. We now need to do the trimming. So I'm just going to turn it to the direction that it's going to be in the pattern. And this is where having the 12.5-inch ruler makes life so easy, because I've given you the dimensions of where to line up things in the pattern, and you can literally trim. Nice and simple. If, however, you don't have one of those rulers and you just have, just a normal, this is a 6.5 by 12.5-inch ruler, whatever type of ruler you do have on hand, as I said, I've given you the instructions in the pattern as to where to line things up. These are the seams that we talk about lining up first. And once you have had that cut done over here and this cut done over here, you can then use that cut corner to trim the rest of the block to 12.5, and that might be you using your cutting mat or some multiple rulers together. Depends on how you want to do it, but that gives you the cuts for your block. So once you've trimmed, there's a few little trimmings to throw away, and here we are left with our beautiful, beautiful block. And I love just picking off all the threads. So there we have our beautiful block ready to go up on the design wall.